Welcome to the Hangry Games Arena, where Kelly Brewster, the author of What's Eating You and host of the Hangry Games, is shaking up the weight loss world. She's providing you with tons of resources and helpful tips to obtain your long-term wellness and weight loss goals once and for all. The Hangry Games is recorded and produced at Open Space Studios.
Hello, Hangry Game Nation. As always, it is so good to be in the studio with you guys. I am hoping you had a wonderful holiday season. And you know, we're kind of a couple of months into the new year, which just to tell you, just absolutely blows my mind. That just blows my mind. And right now, we're probably hovering around the time that most have made these crazy resolutions, maybe have gone way overboard before making them, and we may have already even broken some of them as well. So I'm not a big fan of ever starting an eating plan or a weight loss journey on January 1st or on a Monday. And apparently, absolutely this year, it was a perfect storm. It was both. It was January 1st was on a Monday. So I hope that you didn't do that. I hope that you just, when you decided to make the change, you did it that day. If not, let's do it today. How's that? So today we are going to talk about a topic that's sparked a little bit more interest, I think, lately. And I have been using this kind of just a mantra recently, but we're going to talk about skinny fat today. And that is not a medical term, which we'll talk about in a second, but everybody wants to look like some kind of Victoria's Secret model, right? I mean, they want to eat all the chocolate and all the hamburgers and the potato chips that they want, or so we think, right? You know somebody like this. You do. I promise you do. They say they're on a diet. Heck, I mean, they even are losing weight, still driving through Taco Bell line. They're trying to figure out if there really is 38 flavors in Baskin Robbins, right? I don't know anyone that can eat anything they want and not gain a pound. Brian, excuse me. Oh, heck. Let's bring this elephant into the middle of the room, shall we? You know the person in your life that doesn't give 2 seconds of thought about if they're eating healthy, if they're consuming the right amount of calories, and they surely aren't worried about missing any exercise along the way. My husband, Brian, is notorious for this. He actually is the one who edits these. So he's going to hear all of this and he's going to want to listen all the way through because he's going to be like, did she keep talking about me or what? But he really could jump around in the shower to get wet. I mean, he's very thin, but skinny does not always equate to healthy. And it is a phrase that I am sure he is absolutely sick of hearing, but it is true nonetheless. So today we're going to talk all things skinny fat, what it actually does mean, who is actually at risk, and what can you do to minimize this from happening when you're on your wellness and weight loss journey. I don't want to be that, Kelly. I want to be fit and in shape, and we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. So skinny fat or a skinny fat body type refers to someone that's either a moderate or underweight individual, but does have a higher portion of body fat than what they should have. This often means that this is an individual that appears thin, okay? But their weight, which if you exclude all the essentials, which is your bones, your organs, your muscle, your blood, and skin, is comprised primarily of fat. Okay. As a healthcare professional, skinny fat is not really considered a medical term. The term used in this case is usually normal weight obesity. Yeah, that is actually a term, normal weight obesity, or even thin outside, fat inside, which is called TOFI. Thin inside, fat outside, or thin outside, fat inside. So TOFI, not tofu. Ugh. I know it's a good protein source, but it's not my favorite, but TOFI. So how do you even get this way? How does somebody become skinny fat? Now, some can attribute this to genetics, like Brian, right? Others, it's associated with their lifestyle. Most people think that obesity is associated with metabolic disorders such as heart disease or even type 2 diabetes. However, some that have elevated BMIs have sometimes good metabolic health, so that it's not their sole predictor of good, or for that matter, bad health. And just as bad, and becoming more apparent recently, is people that have lean bodies but are at risk for cardiovascular or cardiometabolic disease such as heart attacks, strokes, diabetes. And a term often used to describe these guys is metabolically obese normal weight. So they've actually developed metabolic diseases, but they don't play the role. They don't look the role on paper. Again, also known as skinny fat. So we're going to talk a lot about this. They look the part, but yes, inside they're just a bowl full of jelly. So we talk about this on a previous podcast episode, but there's a prevalence of type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and obesity, and it's increasing in the United States. They're predicting the numbers to only continue to increase over time. So they're not seeing anything at the moment that's showing that it's going to be on a decline, okay? But most people think that conditions like metabolic syndrome involve that classic increase in central adiposity, where it's people that are the pear shape or they're an apple shaped, which is really that central adiposity, where all of that weight distribution is in the center of their body. That is a primary or prominent sign and symptom of metabolic syndrome, but many can have a very normal BMI and just have an increase in fat distribution, not just in the abdomen, but kind of all over the body. Again, they don't have to move their belt down to ensure that it's a good fit, but that doesn't mean that they're healthy completely inside. So does that make sense? So how do you know if they're skinny fat? I mean, like, what are some of the signs and symptoms of these guys, since they are not the classic presentation? How do you know? Some of the signs of skinny fat or TOFI is excess fat around internal organs. Now, we're not going to see that, right? I can't go, they're looking a little bit chunky around that pancreas right now. I'm just not going to see that, right? So there are scales and specific ways that individuals can be weighed to determine if this is an issue for that individual. Now, these particular procedures or tools are usually not covered by insurance, and they're usually pretty pricey to get done. It is evaluating the fat deposits in tissue that would normally not contain much fat. So you're looking at certain areas of the body. Now, some people will have tissue inflammation is another sign, which can show up in lab values. Like you might have a skinnier individual, but their liver functions are elevated, or their bilirubin may be elevated, and that may be a tell sign for them. Another thing is reduced skeletal muscle mass. Not just on a bone density, like somebody that has a bone density and is showing osteopenia, that's bone, right? But it can also make you think, have they been really trying to stimulate the osteoblast with weight-bearing exercise, and lots of times these guys aren't, and that's why we're seeing that bone loss. But we're talking about something a little bit different. We're talking about skeletal muscle mass. They may be thin, but they're toting these bingo arms, they look just like a bowl full of jelly. Or they just don't have any contour to their larger skeletal muscles, like their thighs or their calves or their gluteal area. And although there are specific ways to figure out the fat ratio in an individual, the BMI honestly still seems to be the easiest, most economical way to measure overall adiposity or fat within, with the most valid results, I think, really. But technology is advancing and at a crazy rate. We all know that, right? And we will see incredible ways to further evaluate this. And there's, calipers that have been able to pinch fat, but that's usually around external areas. A lot of these particular technologies that are out there right now have a way to measure those internal fat deposits. And that's where we'd like to know a little bit more about that, right? So what are some causes of skinny fat? How does someone get there? Especially if it's not a genetic thing for them, how did they get there? Well, for some, it could be a lack of physical activity. For others, it's just an unhealthy diet. Individuals that maybe smoke or have an increase in alcohol consumption can also have this appearance that, wow, they're really thin. They look really nice, but on the inside, they're not showing those same things. These can be seen as risk factors in a change of lifestyle, like somebody that used to be very physically active and then something caused a change to this that caused a change in their body fat. Maybe an injury or, just hey, I'm busier now, so I don't have the same time that I did before. Some of this sounds like it might be a little bit, okay, wait, she's stepping on my toes just a little bit. That's my intention, okay, just so you know, all right? For many, many individuals, the increased consumption of overly processed foods can increase the chance of obesity or then obesity in this situation. And overall, this is a very difficult condition to actually diagnose or pin down, especially because there's not any this absolutely obvious signs and symptoms that just pop out at you, which usually means you're not always able to diagnose it until they've actually developed another condition. So then you're like, why do skinny people get type 2 diabetes? This is the reason. The reason they're getting type 2 diabetes and their BMI is not high or over 30 and they're not considered obese is because they're not eating a healthy diet, they're not putting in the exercise, they're not doing the behavior changes, and eventually the body's saying, I have had enough. Now you're going to be on some medicine. And we don't want to be there, right? So they can develop diabetes, even PCOS, or even insulin resistance and not have that elevated BMI. I think the biggest contributor to the rise in skinny fat is just the increase in consumption of ultra processed foods, UPFs, not SPF, right? It's UPF, those ultra processed foods and those sugary beverages. It's the Starbuckies and the ding dongers. I was going to bring that up. Come on, please. And typically I like to refer to these types of foods as the F foods. No, I am not going to say anything I don't need to be saying on here, right? But the F foods are your fried, fatty, and fast foods with all of the sugars, the oils, the fats, the salts, the preservatives, and all the excess amounts of these foods that you can consume and all these additives you wind up consuming really don't have any place in a healthy eating plan or for those that are striving to achieve really good weight loss and to avoid becoming skinny fat. So one of the main reasons that I have been talking about this specific topic a lot more recently is because of the rise in usage of the GLP-1 meds, which is your skinny shots, your Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Zepbound, semaglutide, tirzepatide. I can bring all of those guys up. Essentially, they all do the same types of things, right? And the issue with these meds is that they work great, okay? They are phenomenal in quieting the food noise, and it allows patients or individuals to lose a significant amount of weight. The problem is that the two most expensive real estates in the body are your brain and your muscles. They require the most from you just to be at rest. These two areas require the sugar that you take in or consume, right? All the energy you consume through proteins, carbs, and fats, they require a lot of that just for you to function, just for you to exist, okay? Well, we can't live without our brains, right? Come on. Well, okay, let me just say this. There are a few that are attempting, and they are a little successful. I'm not gonna lie, but that's a topic for another day. Okay, I digress. So inevitably though, what will happen is these guys are gonna lose their muscle. They're gonna lose their thighs. They're gonna lose their gluteal area, their calves, their arms, all of those big skeletal muscles that at rest are just burning energy and calories for you. So what ultimately burns energy and calories at a resting rate is gone. And so they're losing weight. They're losing weight because they're not taking in as many calories. So they are dropping weight on the scale, okay? But they still have the same amount of fat. Yes, I did air quotes again. Thank you, Joey from Friends. They still have the same amount of fat that they started with on their weight loss journey. What? Yes, you may lose a little bit of your fat on your weight loss and wellness journey. But if you aren't putting in the work to maintain that muscle mass, then you are going to keep a lot of the fat that you started with. Weight-bearing exercise, I seriously, I cannot stress enough how important weight-bearing or resistant training exercises are. Kelly, what are those? Get you a set of dumbbells, put them at your office, have some at home, do squats, do lunges, do arm lifts, do bicep curls, do lat pulls. There's a lot of different, and we've had an episode that we've talked a lot about this, but there are a lot of great Instagram posts. Angie FitFix is really good. She's got a lot of she might have 5 or 6 different exercises that if you repeat 2 to 3 times, you've got a workout in. But doing something like that where you're really truly trying to increase that muscle mass is going to be a game changer for you. This is imperative because what we're trying to avoid is that skinny fat zombie. What are you talking about? They're walking around and they're eating smaller portions of fattening foods without realizing they're just increasing their risk for issues to develop, or even worse, for disease conditions to develop. So you could lose 30, 40, 50 pounds and you don't do any type of exercise. Then you can lose all of your muscle and you have nothing that's going to be able to burn when you go on a maintenance plan or you're just trying to maintain where you got to. And that can cause a lot of other problems, including developing some other disease processes. So how do we avoid this, Kelly? I'm like, I get it, weight-bearing exercise. Okay. But how do we avoid skinny fat? Believe it or not, it's actually pretty simple. We've talked about this ad nauseum. You probably hate hearing it, but you got to increase your physical activity. Specifically, as we mentioned earlier, you've got to do the weight-bearing exercise or the resistant training. You do need to improve your diet with calorie restriction, which is important, right? Because that's how we're going to lose weight. But also what I'm eating, and that I'm reducing those processed foods, that I'm really eating good whole foods. That's going to be a game changer, right? And for some, you may be on some medications that can help to metabolize carbohydrates better, such as metformin, right? If the big issue for you is smoking, then smoking cessation is going to be a game changer. And significantly reducing alcohol intake. We already know, we've talked about this before in a previous podcast, alcohol, you do nothing to burn it. I sound like my pickleball coach. You've got nothing. Brian's going to love that one too. But, it doesn't do anything. You literally just drink it and absorb it into the body, and then it'll eventually become a fat. All of those things can reduce the chance of becoming skinny fat, along with, again, maintaining that regular exercise. Yes, I'm going to beat that horse down pretty good. So just bear with me. Know that it's coming, okay? And as far as being is there a specific treatment plan? Actually, no. There's not actually really a specific plan developed for these guys. In fact, they're going to really receive the same treatment as people who have a metabolically unhealthy obesity level. They're overweight. They've got a BMI over 30. We're still going to use the same maybe medications, products, strategies for those guys as well. But whether this is a genetic factor for you or something that occurred as a result of a lifestyle change, such as implementing a great exercise plan, a healthy eating program, avoiding tobacco, alcohol, and following the specific treatment plan for an underlying health condition that you've been diagnosed with by your provider, it can definitely play a role in preventing skinny fat from being part of your MO. I know, we're at the takeaways already. But see, remember, I'm trying to make these a little shorter for you guys so you can get them in your commute, one and done, right? You can get it done in that going to work or coming from work, right? So let's talk takeaways before we end up and we close this loop up. The biggest thing is, are you skinny fat? Evaluate yourself. Do you have a bingo arm? Am I exercising? I always tell my patients, have you lost a lot of weight recently? But look at yourself in the mirror. Do you look toned? Do you have, can you see definitions in your muscles and stuff like that? And if you can't, then, and you're feeling like, hey, I look thin, but I just feel doughy still. Well, we might be skinny fat, okay? Now, once you've evaluated if you are, in fact, a walking skinny fat zombie, ensure that you're implementing the glass check questions in your life This is part of that prep for it steps that we talk about in the What's Eating You book. There's 3 questions I tell my readers and my patients to do at least weekly. We had a podcast solely on these questions. And these questions are game changers even to avoid skinny fat. Am I eating the right foods and avoiding the wrong? Yes or no? This includes alcohol here. Am I eating the right amount of calories? Yes or no? If I eat like Michael Phelps and I don't exercise like Michael Phelps, I'm not going to be fit like Michael Phelps, right? And the last one, am I exercising? In this case, again, the weight bearing or resistance training is got to be a part of that management plan for overall wellness and weight loss. Ask yourself these questions weekly. I ask myself these questions. It's like it just has to become almost like something that just literally like replays and replays and replays in your brain so that it just becomes an immediate go-to for you. That's important. We need to know the answer to those questions. We want to stop the train from derailing and stay on pace for what we want to do to either lose or to maintain where we've gotten to. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I pray that you guys have an amazing week. We're about out of time here, and I know you've heard enough about the weight bearing exercise for today. Just do it, okay? Please, come on. Make sure to check out our prepforit.com for some great free resources, recipes. We've got some awesome stuff coming in 2024. I'm hoping to have a little merchandise in there so you can look at. We're also going to have a lot of like a library or grocery where you can look at what are the best options for some things that if you want to replace and make some substitutions, what it would look like. As always, Hangry Game Nation, may the odds always be in your favor. And as Ashley Paulson says, that's my Nordic track trainer, she says, I am kicking you out of here. Thank you and have a great one, y'all.